Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video we will be looking at the influence of culture and media on gender roles, which you need to know for AQA A-level psychology in the subtopic of gender. I hope you enjoy this video and find it helpful. Let's get started. Social learning theorists see gender role behavior as largely determined by the environment and socialization. Two key areas through which social norms are transmitted and communicated are culture and the media. These may be linked in the sense that the media, TV, film, etc., reflect and confirm dominant cultural norms of gender roles. The influence of culture on gender roles. Cultural influence on gender roles. Culture in the context of its influence on gender roles refers to the shared beliefs, practices, rulers, norms, customs, morals, and values and child-rearing practices that bind a particular group of people together. It plays a foundational role in shaping gender roles by establishing norms for acceptable behavior based on gender. Traditional gender norms. In many cultures, traditional roles often assign men to be providers and protectors, and women to be caretakers and homemakers. These roles are often passed down through generations and reinforced through religion, family structures, education, and social institutions. Cultural variation. Gender roles vary widely across cultures. For example, in some indigenous cultures, there are recognized roles beyond the binary of male and female. What is considered masculine or feminine behavior can differ dramatically depending on cultural context. Cultural evolution. Over time, cultures change. Movements for gender equality and LGBTQ+ rights have influenced a shift in how gender roles are perceived and enacted. Sex and Temperament in Three Primitive Societies, 1935, by Margaret Mead. Aim. Mead aimed to explore whether gender roles, masculinity and femininity, are biologically determined or culturally constructed. Specifically, she sought to understand how different cultures shaped the personalities and behaviors of men and women. Her goal was to challenge the Western assumption that characteristics like aggression, in males, and nurturing, in females, were inherent or natural. Instead, she wanted to see if these were the result of socialization and cultural expectations. Procedure. The study was conducted in Papua New Guinea in the early 1930s. Participant observation and ethnographic fieldwork. Mead lived among and observed three tribal societies, the Arapesh, the Mundaguma, and the Chambuli, now Chambri. She lived with each group for several months and observed their daily lives, interviewed members, and took detailed notes on child-rearing practices, gender expectations, division of labor, and personality traits of men and women. Findings. Arapesh. Both men and women were gentle, cooperative, and nurturing. They shared child-rearing responsibilities. Traits considered feminine in Western cultures were valued in both sexes. Mundaguma. Both sexes were aggressive, competitive, and emotionally detached. Social life was marked by tension and hostility. Traits considered masculine in Western cultures were dominant in both men and women. Chambuli. There was a reversal of traditional Western gender roles. Women were dominant, managerial, and assertive, took charge of economic and decision-making activities, and men were more emotional, dependent, and concerned with appearance. This society illustrated how gender roles could be dramatically different and still function effectively. Conclusions. Mead concluded that gender roles are not biologically fixed but are socially and culturally constructed. What a society considers masculine or feminine behavior varies widely from one culture to another. The study challenged the universal validity of Western gender norms, suggesting that people learn their gender roles through cultural socialization, not biology. It supported the idea that nature, biology, plays a lesser role than nurture, culture, in shaping human behavior, especially regarding gender. A limitation of Mead's study as cross-cultural research into the influence of culture on gender roles is that there is research that contradicts her finding that gender roles are entirely culturally determined, by providing evidence of universal patterns in gendered mate preferences that suggest biological influences across all human societies. Buss, 1995, carried out cross-cultural research to investigate whether human mate preferences, a gender role behavior, were similar across cultures. He found consistent patterns in mate preference in 37 different countries across all continents. In all cultures, women preferred men who could offer wealth and resources, whereas men looked for youth and physical attractiveness in a potential partner. This is a limitation because it suggests a biological basis for these preferences, possibly rooted in evolutionary psychology, e.g. reproductive fitness and parental investment theory. A limitation of Mead's study as cross-cultural research into the influence of culture on gender roles is that there is research to suggest that gender roles are not biologically fixed but culturally shaped. Monroe and Monroe, 1975, revealed that in most societies, division of labor is organized along gender lines, with males typically the breadwinners and females often the nurturers. This is a limitation because it suggests that across most societies, the roles of men as providers and women as caregivers are common and consistent, implying some biological influence, such as evolutionary pressures or physical differences, on how labor is divided. A limitation of Mead's study as cross-cultural research into the influence of culture on gender roles is that the study suffers from researcher bias. Mead, 1935, later changed her belief and accepted that gender roles were predominantly biological in nature. According to Booth, 1975, this change's view was due to Mead marrying a man with traditional views, who she later went on to have her own child with. This is a limitation because it suggests that the findings might not be entirely objective and could be influenced by the researcher's own beliefs or experiences. A limitation of Mead's study as cross-cultural research into the influence of culture on gender roles is that it is contradicted by research that suggests biology affects gender roles. Eagley and Wood, 1999, argued that the biological and thus physical differences between men and women allowed each to perform certain tasks more efficiently. Childbearing and the need to nurse infants mean women are better placed to care for young children but less able to take on roles that require significant absence from home. Men have the advantage of greater speed and upper body strength, which facilitates performance-based tasks that require bursts of energy and strength. This is a limitation because it suggests that cultural explanations for gender roles might not be the whole story, and biological factors could play a more significant role than Mead initially acknowledged. A limitation of Mead's study as cross-cultural research into the influence of culture on gender roles is that the findings maybe have been affected by demand characteristics and response bias. Freeman, 1984, who had worked with the native Samoans, reported that the native Samoans had informed him that they had created a false picture of their behavior and misled Mead to follow her preconceptions of what she thought she would find. This is a limitation because it suggests that Mead's conclusions about Samoan culture and gender roles might not accurately reflect reality and instead could be a product of the participants' deliberate manipulation and Mead's own biases. However, this viewpoint has been criticized by Appeal, 1984, who believed that Friedman may have misrepresented Mead's original fieldwork. His interviews were conducted decades later and under very different circumstances. A strength of cross-cultural research into the influence of culture on gender roles is that there is research to support the influence of culture changing gender roles. Hofstede, 2001, argues that in industrialized cultures the changing status and expectations of women are a function of their increasingly active role in the workplace and away from the domestic sphere. This has led to a breakdown of traditional stereotypes in advanced industrialized societies. In traditional societies, women still occupy the role of housemaker as a result of social, cultural, and religious pressures. This is a strength because it suggests that cultural factors can significantly shape and alter gender roles, especially in societies undergoing industrialization, which supports the idea that gender roles aren't solely determined by biology. A strength of cross-cultural research into the influence of culture on gender roles is that it provides insight into the extent to which gender is biological and the extent to which gender is a social construct. If gender roles were biological, then it would be expected that research would show that different cultures have the same gender stereotypes for gender roles because human biology is the same across cultures. If gender roles were social constructs, then it would be expected that research would show that different cultures have great variations between gender stereotypes for gender roles because different cultures would create different social norms and values. This is a strength because it suggests that cross-cultural research can help us tease apart the influence of biology versus social and cultural factors in shaping gender roles. A limitation of cross-cultural research into the influence of culture on gender roles is that it cannot solve the problem of the nature-nurture debate in relation to gender development. The effects and influences that nature and nurture have on gender development cannot be separated. As soon as a child is born, their socialization into society begins, they are immediately exposed to gender role expectations. It is therefore very difficult to determine where the influence of biology, nature, stops, and the influence of society, nurture, begins. This is a limitation because it suggests that it's nearly impossible to isolate the specific contributions of biology and socialization to gender development. The two are so intertwined from birth that cross-cultural research, while valuable, can't definitively resolve the nature-nurture debate in this area. The influence of media on gender roles. Media, such as television, film, advertising, video games, and social media, both reflects and shapes societal views about gender. Stereotyping. Media often portrays men as assertive, aggressive, and emotionally reserved, while women are shown as nurturing, emotional, and appearance-focused. These stereotypes can limit individuals' perceptions of their own potential and others. Representation. Underrepresentation of women, non-binary, and transgender people in media, or their portrayal in narrow roles, contributes to societal bias. More diverse and realistic representations help challenge traditional gender roles and promote inclusivity. Children and media. Children's shows, books, and toys often reinforce traditional gender roles early in life, shaping gender identity and expectations from a young age. Social media. Social media provides a platform for both reinforcing stereotypes, e.g., influencer beauty standards, and challenging them, e.g., feminist, LGBTQ+, and body-positive content. A strength of research into media influence on gender roles is that there is research to suggest that the media may play a role in reinforcing widespread social stereotypes concerning male and female behavior. Fernham and Farraher, 2000, found that men were more likely to be shown in an autonomous and authoritative roles within a professional setting, whereas women were often seen occupying familial roles with domestic settings. This is a strength because it suggests that research into media influence on gender roles has empirical support, demonstrating a clear link between media content and the reinforcement of societal stereotypes. A strength of research into media influence on gender roles is that there is research to suggest that the media plays a significant role in shaping and reinforcing traditional gender roles. Bussey and Bandura, 1999, found that media portrayals often reinforce traditional gender stereotypes. Men are typically depicted as independent, ambitious, and in control, often shown in high-status jobs and as advice givers. In contrast, women are frequently portrayed as dependent, emotional, unambitious, and in domestic or low-status roles, often shown as advice seekers. These patterns also appear in advertising, where men tend to promote products related to technology, cars, and finance, while women are associated with food and beauty items. Additionally, earlier work by Bussey and Bandura, 1992, highlights the role of peer influence in enforcing gender roles, with young children often policing gender-appropriate behavior, such as criticizing peers for playing with toys associated with the opposite gender. This is a strength because it suggests that research into media influence on gender roles is well supported by multiple studies and converging evidence. A strength of research into media influence on gender roles is that there is research to suggest that self-efficacy had changed as a result of media influence. Mitra et al., 2019, analyzed the attitudes of people in India who had watched a program designed to challenge deep-rooted gender stereotypes. The program was a detective drama that ran for 78 episodes. Girls who watched the program were more likely to see themselves as capable of working outside the home than non-viewers. This is a strength because it suggests that research into media influence on gender roles is not limited to identifying negative impacts but also explores the potential for positive change. A strength of research into media influence on gender roles is that there is research suggest that the more time individuals spend living in the media world, the more likely they are to believe that this reflects social reality. Bond and Drogos, 2014, found a positive correlation between time spent watching the reality TV program Jersey Shore and permissive attitudes towards casual sex. This effect was still found to be true when researchers controlled for the influence of such factors as existing sexual attitudes, parental attitudes, and religious beliefs. This is a strength because it suggests that research into media influence on gender roles has ecological validity. A strength of research into media influence on gender roles is that there is real-world evidence that suggests that the media can play a positive role in challenging traditional stereotypes through counter-stereotypes. More recent Disney films have challenged traditional ideas about masculinity and femininity. For example, Brave specifically challenges traditional gender roles through its protagonist, Merida. Unlike many Disney princesses, Merida is not defined by her desire for romantic love or marriage. Her primary goal is to control her own destiny and pursue her own interests, such as archery and adventure. The film also subverts traditional expectations of femininity by portraying Merida as strong-willed, independent, and skilled in traditionally masculine activities, archery. This is a strength because it suggests that the media can be a powerful tool for promoting positive social change. A strength of research into media influence on gender roles is that there is research to suggest that media plays a significant role in reinforcing gender stereotypes. McGee and Frew, 1980, conducted a 15-month longitudinal study on children aged 6 to 12 and found a correlation between television exposure and gender stereotypical views. Children who watched more than 25 hours of TV per week held more stereotypical perceptions of gender roles, particularly male stereotypes, compared to those who watched 10 hours or less. This is a strength because it suggests that higher exposure to gendered media content is associated with more stereotypical gender-related behaviors. A strength of research into media influence on gender roles is that there is research to suggest that media has a strong and direct influence on the development of gender role perceptions. Williams, 1975, conducted a study on a small community in Canada, Hotel, who did not have television access, as well as an additional 2 towns, one with only one Canadian channel, Unitel, and another that had access to multiple American channels, Multitel. Hotel and Unitel attitudes and behavior was studied prior to the installation of television and post-installation through the use of questionnaires that assessed gender stereotypes. Williams found that the views of children in Notel had become significantly more sex-typed 2 years after the installation of television. He also found that the children in Notes and Unitel had weaker sex-typed views than the children in Multitel who were exposed to more American channels. This was particularly the case for the girls and demonstrated the significant influence media can have on people's perception of gender roles. This is a strength because it suggests that there is a correlation between media exposure and the adoption of gender stereotypes. However, a limitation of this study is that it is idiographic, as isolating the effects of media influences on gender stereotypes is incredibly difficult, as almost all accessible children for studies watch television, apart from the rare communities in isolated parts of the world where there is no television. These communities are rare and often have their own cultural attitudes and behavior, which could affect gender beliefs, but would be related to their isolation from society, rather than the media. This is a limitation because it suggests that the findings from the study are not representative and cannot be generalized to the wider population. A limitation of research into media influence on gender roles is that there is research to contradict the idea that media influences are primary influence that affect gender roles and stereotypes. Durkin, 1985, argues that even very young children are not passive and uncritical recipients of media coverage. In fact, norms within the child's family may be the bigger determinant on the child's gender attitudes and behavior. If media representations confirm existing gender norms held by the family hen, these are likely to be reinforced in the child's mind. If not, then such representations are likely to be rejected. This is a limitation because it suggests that the influence of media on gender roles may be less direct and more complex than initially assumed. A limitation of research into media influence on gender roles is that the majority of the research used to support or contradict the media's influence on gender roles lacks temporal validity. The majority of research that links media consumption and gender stereotypical views was conducted at least 20 years ago. In the modern day, the portrayal of men and women in the media is less gender stereotypical than it was 20 years ago, with increased representation, leading to more female characters in traditionally male-dominated roles, e.g., STEM fields, leadership positions, and male characters displaying a wider range of emotions and interests beyond typical masculine traits and challenges to traditional tropes, for example female characters being less frequently portrayed as damsels in distress, and male characters are less often depicted as emotionless and hyper-aggressive. This is a limitation because it suggests that the impact of media on gender roles may not be consistent across different time periods. A limitation of research into media influence on gender roles is that there is research to contradict the idea that media is the cause of children's gender-appropriate behavior. Pingree, 1978, found that older boys actually displayed stronger stereotypes after exposure to non-traditional role models. If media was the primary cause of children's gender-appropriate behaviors, then Pingree would have found boys imitating the behavior of the non-traditional role models they observed. This is a limitation because it suggests that media may not be the sole determinant of gender role development. A limitation of research into media influence on gender roles is that a cause and effect relationship between the media and the formation of gender role stereotypes cannot be established. It could be argued that the media is simply reflecting social norms regarding the expected behavior of males and females, rather than determining these behaviors. Furthermore, the vast majority of children are exposed to the media on a regular basis, and therefore control groups of children who are not exposed to the media's influence are not available for comparison. This is a limitation because it suggests that media may not be the sole determinant of gender role development. Thank you for watching. If you have enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more content like this. Bye.